Warning: this video includes descriptions of acts that may cause some viewers discomfort. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the History of True Crime. Today we will be looking into the sickening story of Luis Garavito, the Beast, or the Monster of Genova. Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos, born to parents Manuel Garavito, allegedly an adulterous, drunk and abusive man, and Rosa Cubillos, described as a violent woman. He was the eldest of 7 siblings with 3 younger brothers and 3 younger sisters. Luis was born in Genova, where he lived with his family for a short time. They relocated to Ceylon before he had entered primary school due to the armed conflict in Colombia at the time. As a child, Garavito recalled being strapped to a tree and beaten with a machete case by his father after attempting to protect his mother Rosa from the violent outbursts that Manuel was prone to. Manuel would beat Rosa regularly and was known to have done so throughout her pregnancies. Garavito was also made to sleep in the bed with his father, regularly nude, and stated that he had been fondled by Manuel on at least one occasion. During his time at school, Garavito showed an eagerness to learn, excelling in his classes for a short while before facing bullying from his peers due to his appearance. This repeated bullying caused Garavito to become withdrawn and even prompted him to act out and react violently when teased. His teachers made no attempt to aid Garavito, and he was pulled out of school in 1968, around 5th grade, to work with his father and supplement the family's income. At this point, Manuel had forbidden his son to have any friends or girlfriends, forcing his son to be lonely, antisocial, and work-focused. Just a year after being pulled from school, Garavito faced extensive physical and sexual abuse from a friend of his father, a neighbor of the family that owned a local drugstore. Upon visiting to have his shots, Garavito was allegedly bound to a bed, burnt with a candle, cut with razor blades, and had been bitten on his buttocks and genitals by the man on several occasions. Garavito hid the sexual abuse from his family, believing that they would feel little to no concern for him or even believe him at all. Following the first instance of abuse that he faced, Garavito killed and dissected 2 birds in frustration, then began suggesting to his younger siblings that they sleep naked with him in their shared bed, leading to him fondling his siblings on several occasions. Around this time, he allegedly molested a 6-year-old boy. The abuse that Garavito faced over the course of his childhood left him sexually impotent and unable to ejaculate properly. In 1971, the family relocated to Trujillo, ending the abuse that the neighbor had been subjecting him to. However, the pain that he faced would not end here. Soon after the family's arrival in Trujillo, Garavito was invited to a neighbor's house where he was shown heterosexual pornography. When he responded with disgust, he was beaten and raped. In 1972, 15-year-old Garavito began aggressively trying to initiate sexual relations with women. However, he was consistently rejected. This pushed him to turn to alcohol. Stealing drinks from family members with addictions of their own, Garavito quickly became addicted. He was incredibly troubled. In the following months, he was briefly evicted from the home when he was caught attempting to rape a 5-year-old boy, and again the following year after the attempted assault on a 6-year-old boy at a Batoga train station. The assault was interrupted by police after the boy screamed. Manuel reprimanded Luis for choosing to assault a young boy instead of a woman and evicted him from the family home for the final time for homosexual behavior. After leaving the family home, Garavito was in and out of work, losing many of his jobs due to physical altercations with his co-workers. Over the course of his teenage years and young adult life, Garavito befriended many women, many of which were single mothers. They reported that Garavito nurtured their children, treating them as though they were his own, in addition to being a loving boyfriend when he was sober. Though in his drunken states he would be violent and regularly vowed to murder his father. These drunken states often resulted in Garavito physically abusing his girlfriends, finding himself to be the town gossip, and often evicted again. In the 1970s, Garavito began suffering with symptoms of depression, psychosis, and paranoia, which he claims is due to the trauma that he faced during his childhood. He then began compulsively molesting both male and female children, developing an almost exclusive preference for pubescent boys. Due to his depression and suicidal feelings, Garavito expressed a desire to start a family, insisting on engaging in intercourse when drunk but struggling to maintain erections. He fell into alcoholism to cope with his past traumas but began attending AA meetings in 1978. During this time he converted to the Pentecostal faith and briefly reconnected with his first girlfriend, Luz Mary, after the relationship falling apart and Garavito beginning to drift further from his family. He relocated to the town of Armenia where he began working at a bakery. He continued attending AA meetings, frequently went to church and saw psychiatrists, but would end his day in Valencia Park procuring the services of child prostitutes. In the 1980s, Garavito's position at the bakery was terminated after provoking a fight with a colleague. On losing his job, he attempted suicide. Following his failed attempt, Garavito sought psychiatric care and was regularly hospitalized throughout the spring of 1980. He was primarily treated for his depression, despite clear signs of psychosis and bulimia. His pedophilic desires were never shared with his psychiatrists. Late 1980, Garavito gained employment at a supermarket where he was given 2-hour lunch breaks every Thursday and Sunday afternoon. Here he met Claudia, a single mother and beautician. They began a relationship, but it was short-lived. Garavito stated that he could not sustain Claudia's spending habits. Despite this, Garavito said that Claudia was the one woman whose company he could and did enjoy, although they did not engage in intercourse. Garavito would satisfy his urges on his lunch breaks, binding and raping children in neighboring towns, Quimbaya and Calarca. In the autumn of 1980, he began carrying a small bag containing candles, razor blades, and lighters to facilitate his desire to torture his victims in the same way that he had been abused. Garavito also had a tooth removed to enable him to bite his victims more effectively. Following his crimes, he would write the name of the child he had molested in a blue notebook, praying for them while pacing his room, naked, and pounding his chest in a ritualistic fashion. He began to compulsively read the Bible each night, looking for ways to justify his actions and desires, regularly leaning on the Book of Psalms for guidance before developing an interest in esoteric studies, tarot, and Satanism. Afflicted with bouts of depression, Garavito would suffer nightmares about his victims, waking most nights in tears before erupting into laughter, remembering the pleasure that he received from inflicting such pain and horrors onto his victims. Garavito later became fond of Hitler after reading Mein Kampf. This developed into idolization for the German leader. Garavito stated that he found similarities in their childhoods, like the concentration camps, and expressed admiration for the mass graves of the Holocaust. He also displayed an interest in Colombia's spree killer Campo Elias Delgado, a mass murderer that he desired to emulate, stating he wished to obtain a machine gun and start on his father, his whole family, and then take his own life. Between 1980 and 1992, it is estimated that Garavito targeted over 200 young children, subjecting them to rape and torture, all while under psychiatric care. While using an Ouija board, Garavito stated that he made contact with the devil in a state of psychosis. The devil said to him, "Kill, that with killing many things will come," prompting Garavito to attempt his first murder on October 1, 1992. He drunkenly lured a young boy that was selling sweets and cigars to passers-by into the Melia Hotel sector. Garavito was interrupted by police and beaten. His belongings were stolen before he was released. This, seeming like an injustice, prompted new resolve in Garavito. His first murder would take place on October 4th of that year, just 3 days later. His first victim was a young boy called Juan Carlos. Following this, Garavito began wearing disguises to evade chance of identification. At this point, he became known as Goofy, a man that was generous to the children of Trujillo. Garavito would keep the identification cards, clothing, and receipts of his victims as trophies in a black suitcase that he later gave to his sister Esther before giving it to his first girlfriend Luz Mary. He would also amputate the toes of his victims and keep them for himself before disposing of them, the fear of discovery setting in. Toward the end of Garavito's crime spree, he lived as a drifter, luring minors into his reach before inflicting the same horrendous acts on them that he had done to so many before. Tiring of how easy it had become, Garavito searched back to his desire to commit mass murder, in which he intended to kidnap several adults and murder them, hoping to die himself in the frenzy as journalists reported the events taking place. Garavito was detained before his fantasy could be lived out. The attempted sexual assault of John Ivan Sabugal resulted in Garavito being detained on April 22, 1999. Garavito was held for several months before his confession on October 28 of the same year. He is confirmed to have murdered at least 193 minors in total, making him the most prolific serial killer in modern history. He was found guilty of 138 of the accounts. The others are ongoing. If his later confession in 2003 is to be believed, the murder of an additional 23 minors and 5 adults would raise the number of suspected victims that fell to Garavito to 221. Garavito's sentences totaled 1,853 years and 9 days. However, Colombian law states that a maximum sentence can only total 40 years, meaning the sentence was massively reduced. Garavito's sentence was somehow reduced to just 22 years. Luis Garavito, the Beast, the Monster of Genova, becomes eligible for parole in 2023. If you liked this video and want to find out more, click the link in the description to access our #1 source of information. Like and subscribe to be the first to see our next video. Do you have a story you would like to hear on our channel? Comment down below to hear your favorite true crime stories.